Today, I welcome Amanda Johnson of the Edmonton Police Service. I met Amanda when we gathered to help set up Shari Forbes' scavenging experiments in Alberta in August 2021. Even though I grilled Amanda about what she did and how she was involved in searches, she still agreed to be interviewed for a podcast episode. Stay tuned to hear our discussion. Welcome to the podcast Scattered, one person's search for the story behind scattered remains. My name is Yvonne Chorlin. I'm a physical anthropologist and archaeologist. In other words, I like dead people. In this podcast, I speak about the challenges of searching for, discovering, and recovering dispersed remains from outdoor contexts. I offer new perspectives and insights directly from the mouths of researchers, as well as experiences of people who search for remains. All of this aims to provide you with valuable and accessible information on a subject that isn't talked about, doesn't seem to be a priority, and that is very understudied. I hope you enjoy. All right, so let's just start from the very beginning, and please tell me who you are and your role and all that good stuff.
Sure. So I'm Amanda Johnson. I am with the Edmonton Police. I'm actually have just changed roles. So currently I am an acting detective in Homicide Unit.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. So I just kind of started right now as a transition. But before that, and when I met you, I was a constable in the Missing Persons Unit in Edmonton Police. And I've been doing that since 2018. Alongside with that, I'm also a trained search manager. So we go out and do numerous types of searches for kind of anything. So I did the training for that. I guess a little bit about my career previous to that, I was in the historical homicide unit, and I worked on the project for missing and murdered Indigenous women. And then before that, I was a patrol member in Edmonton Police. And then before I was Edmonton Police, I was actually in the RCMP. So I was there for 5.5 years. I started up in the Northwest Territories and was in Inuvik. And really throughout my career have really specialized myself into search and rescue, missing persons, major case investigations, that kind of thing. So I did 2 years in Inuvik, Northwest Territories, and then I went to a North District Relief Unit. So I did fly-ins to all the small communities. So I worked in every small community north of Yellowknife, all the little remote fly-ins. And then I came down to Redwater, Alberta, and I was there for 1.5 years, but as general patrol. And then I transitioned over to Edmonton Police.
Wow. You are precisely the person I want to talk to. So thank you very much for joining me on this podcast. I'm just going to jump right in with my 50 bazillion questions here.
Please do.
How often do you find that you're looking for human remains? Like, so not a whole person and not a living person, but their remains.
Yeah. So I guess as a search manager, you're generally going out on the, like as a most probability, we're going out and we're looking for someone who's immediately lost, say like a lost child or dementia, Alzheimer's person. But since I've been in the missing persons unit, my niche kind of falls within the searching for human remains side of things, because my files specifically in Edmonton Police can be in the missing persons unit can be like long-term files. So it after a certain amount of time, we never know. We never know whether they're alive, deceased, what's going on. So we have to piece that puzzle together. But we widen our scope to any possibility. So there's a possibility that they could still be living, alive, and out there somewhere just kind of off the grid. But there's also a possibility that they could be deceased, and we could be looking for human remains. So I guess since I've been a search manager, I would say I look for human remains, and like I said, we don't necessarily know 100% that they are deceased, and we are looking for remains, but we need to have that as an investigative possibility. So, if I had to put a number on it, during the summer we definitely do a lot more. This summer alone, I think I've done probably about six or seven where I'm looking for human scattered remains.
Okay, so that's actually quite a few.
Yeah, and like I said, I see a lot more of them just because of my position in Edmonton Police, that I am in the missing persons unit. So those are specifically my files, and then being cross-trained as a search manager, I find that I do a lot of those.
Wow, yeah, that was actually more than I was expecting. I was expecting, maybe 2, 3 or something, and then go 2 or 3 years with nothing, and then do another 2, 3 or whatever. But
yeah, no, we do see quite a few of them. Just I guess recently the missing person that we were looking for, it was non-criminal in nature, but they were deceased. So and there was since they had gone missing, and since the time that we had found them was just over a 2-week time period, so there was a lot of scattering of the human remains and animal predation. So and that was just we're still finding bones and pieces up to today's date. I just got a call actually about an hour ago that they had found another rib bone. So we're still continuously doing that one. So those happen quite a bit. They're not necessarily criminal in nature. I do also, I was involved in a couple that were criminal in nature, and I won't be able to talk about those as much, but the ones that are non-criminal in nature, we end up in the missing persons unit. We deal with those quite a bit. Yeah.
Very interesting. So let's just go back a little bit. In your training as a search manager or just as a searcher, does that training include searching for human remains, including bone?
So it's a broad course that takes a week long, and they do focus a lot on the behaviors of living persons. So, for example, dementia, suicidal persons, children, Alzheimer's. They do a lot of that type of training, but there is also training that to look for example, a criminal file where you are looking for human remains. There was a component involved in the training for looking for scattered human remains. Yes.
And is that offered through Edmonton Police, or is that a different organization that offers that training?
So that's the search managers of Alberta. So through the Edmonton Police, they did put me through the training, but it was cross training with RCMP, peace officers. So there was multiple organizations, and it's actually put on by a trained searcher who has done years and years and years in the field in regards to searching. So it's not put on by police because they're not really necessarily considered the subject matter experts. So they want to make sure that you're getting, I guess, the best type of training.
Got it. All right. Good stuff. And what did you learn through that training about searching for human remains, especially in hindsight? Now that you've done some searches that involve human remains, I'd just like to get an idea of, I guess, how well that training has served you when actually on a search for human remains.
Right. So when it came to searching for human remains, they more so did case studies, which I really liked because it showed you what had actually happened. So I remember in the training, they had gone over it was a possible homicide, and the body had been dragged from an area. We're not 100% sure that it was a homicide, but they treated it as such that it was a criminal file. And there was massive search scales. They also did so I'll talk about that one for a minute. So that was in the mountains, in Alberta, and they had done miles and miles of searching with cadaver dogs, for that one. And then there was also a couple criminal files that were homicides, and they use like the search and rescue team from Stowe, which is the RCMP. Oh my goodness, I don't even remember what Stowe stands for now. But they are cross-trained police members that are trained to do all types of searches. So as a search manager, I am not a trained searcher. I am trained how they search and how to deploy them as searchers. So I don't personally go out and search for them. I understand what they do and what their capabilities are, and then I deploy them into areas that I deem necessary.
Got it. Okay. That's a great distinction to make, that as a search manager, you're not necessarily doing the searching.
Yes, that's right. We are trained as to what types of searches they do and to what level they are, but we don't. So, and then the searchers, they train weekly, a lot of them, on their search methods, and especially if they have dogs and so on and so forth. Like, they are training constantly all the time to keep those skills up, because there's live dogs, there's cadaver dogs. So I don't train as a searcher. I train as to what they're capable of and how I want to deploy them to have the most success and to find potentially my people, if they are high risk, to find them the fastest.
Got it. Okay. So could you give me an example of how a search for a missing person, not missing for that long, so they're presumed still living, would differ from a search where the person is missing and presumed dead and for a long time? So we're possibly looking for human remains. So between a live person and human remains searching.
Yeah, so my deployment's going to be very, very different for that. So, for example, if I have a missing Alzheimer's patient, I want to get out there as fast as I can, and I want to learn the behaviors of, say, for example, it is that Alzheimer's patient. So I want to know what human behaviors for an Alzheimer's patient is going to be and how to quickly deploy. So if they go missing at 5 p.m., I want to get out there. The minute that I get that call, I want to be out there with all of my searchers. I want to be out there with, for example, live dogs. I want to be out there with ground searchers as quick as I can, and cover off. Most missing persons are found within like a 300-meter radius of where the point they were last seen. So I want to make sure I cover that off as soon as I can. Like, the clock is really ticking when you have a missing person, especially if, for example, it is an Alzheimer's patient or someone who's requiring medication or may succumb to the elements. Like, it's really against the clock. So you're getting to that area as soon as you can. You're deploying searchers immediately. Whereas when I have a person that I have presumed to be deceased and I am looking for that body, then I can really slow it down. I can have an action plan. I can I can plan to have, as many cadaver dogs as I can to come out, because I'm not going to bring live dogs. I might not even necessarily bring ground searchers if I don't really know the area. So, for example, I may have miles and miles of area to cover off because I don't exactly know where they are. So, ground searchers are going to be a lot slower than a cadaver dog covering off an entire area. So I really have a lot of time when it comes to that. I know, like, that there's really no chance that this person is alive. I have a lot more time to plan out my execution, to get more resources than I might for an immediate search. So I can, for example, plan it for tomorrow at 12 p.m. when I know the weather is going to be optimal the wind's going to be in the right direction for the dogs, that kind of thing. So you have to take into account your environmental factors. But I also don't want to delay it because I don't want the public to come across this person, or it's a fine balance as well. But your deployment's very different from someone who's high risk and potentially their life is at risk, as opposed to, you're looking for human remains.
Right. Okay. So you mentioned using dogs, and that ground searching can be a bit slower than using cadaver dogs.
Yeah, for sure. So a ground searcher, they have to use strictly their eyes. So a human, when they're searching, can, of course, you can use your nose, but it's nowhere to the degree of a dog. So when you have a ground searchers deploying, they can go through, say, a wooded area only so quickly, because they have to look everywhere. They have to look up, they have to look down, they have to look side to side. Whereas the dogs, of course, they use their sense of smell, and it's hundreds and hundreds of times better than ours. So they are able to find things like, and I've seen it over and over again, where a searcher will just walk over a bone and they won't know it. Or over a body part, and it's and better than I do that when a body starts to decompose, that it's really hard to tell when you're in a wooded area the difference between a decomposing body and just the ground itself. So the searchers will miss that way more often than a dog will. So I do like to rely on both. Like, I will send the dogs out first when there's no smell in the area. I will have them do that area. If I think there's a high probability that that body is in that area, and it wasn't found by the dogs, I will send ground searchers in after the fact, after the dogs are done, to go and just double check and to reconfirm. And depending on what the searchers bring back as a probability of detection. So for example, if I send out a dog into a 300-meter radius, they don't find anything, they come back, and just based on the landscape, I say, what was your probability of detection? And they say, it wasn't very good, it was very wooded. I'd say only 60%. Then I'll say, okay, I think there's a high probability that there might be a person in that area. So I'm going to send ground searchers out after the fact so that I can bring my probability of detection closer to 100%. It'll never be 100%, but I want to get it as close to 100% as I can.
Okay. Wow, that's a lot of food for thought. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just going to start blathering here and stop me if I'm wrong. So using cadaver dogs, particularly when you don't know exactly where the deceased could be, is more effective and more efficient than using ground searchers. Is that correct?
Yes, I would say so. And of course it's case by case basis, but okay. I mean, as long as those dogs have the wind direction, because if you think of it, you also have a human handler when you have a cadaver dog. So you pretty much have a fully trained searcher as well as a cadaver dog on top of that. So you're kind of double dipping. You have both at that time. Whereas my ground searchers, they are very, very well trained, but it's going to be a lot different. Like they're very beneficial for doing the 300-meter when you have a missing Alzheimer's patient who's at risk. They can call out to the person. They're able to detect human behavior a little better than a dog. So it really depends on what your situation is and how you're going to deploy all of your resources, because I do use ground searchers for every search as well. I just might deploy them a little bit differently than I'll deploy a cadaver dog.
Got it. Okay. Because what I'm trying to do right now in my brain is reconciling my experience and stories I've heard where ground searchers have gone out and they have missed human remains. They've walked right over them. The search just has not been all that great. Versus, I mean, these wonderful search techniques, knowing the capabilities of your searchers, deploying different methods depending on the situations. Like I'm trying to reconcile that in my brain right now. And maybe this is just because of you know, my experience or these stories that I've heard. The searchers weren't properly trained for whatever reason, who knows. And in your experience and your training, that is like really, really well trained. So we're looking at two ends of a continuum, perhaps.
Yeah, for sure. So, and I can attest to this 100% just in my last search, because there was so much animal predation and decomposition of the body. There was a lot of insect activity, that like the bones within a 2-week time were almost like cleaned right off. So we when I deployed the cadaver dogs and I went to collect the rest of the human remains, I was told a GPS point of where one of the rib bones was. I went to that location. There was a flag over top of the bone. I could not find this rib bone for there is no way that I could tell the difference between, and I mean, I have seen a lot, like I've been to autopsies. I've seen a lot of human remains. I've seen rib bones. So it's not like I didn't know what they look like. I could not find it. I had to get the cadaver dog to come over and put his nose right on the bone. And he just zeroed in. Like, the handler asked him to show me where the bone was. He went, put his nose right on top of the bone. And I'm like, oh my goodness, there it is. So there is capabilities of a cadaver dog that really you would never be able to find as a human searcher, no matter how well you're trained. If one leaf is covering something, you're not going to see it. And when you have miles and miles to search, it's going to be finding that needle in a haystack, that I really rely on my cadaver dogs for human remains. I will not do a search for human remains without cadaver dogs. That's just me personally as a searcher, because I've seen their capabilities. I've seen the success using them. So when I know I'm looking for remains, I am always calling a cadaver dog.
Wow, because I've heard stories, that cadaver dogs, they've got their pros and cons, pluses and minuses, and that they're good in some situations and not other situations. So I mean, for you to say that you will not do a search without cadaver dogs, that's saying something.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, of course, it's not 100%, right? Nothing is going to be 100%. And I have seen dogs miss it. I've seen them kind of alert to the area. Maybe something's there. So that's why I cover off with a number of resources. So I've also had one where, the wind direction just was not the right way. And I ended up finding my remains via drone. So the drone went up over a body of water and found my deceased person in the tall grass, whereas these dogs did not alert to it at all. But I thought there was a high probability. So I sent my cadaver dogs in first. There was no success. I sent my ground searchers in along with the drone, and the drones was the one that ended up finding it. So there's situations where they might not alert based on if it's getting too cold. It's all based on that scent, right? So if that scent is not showing to the dogs, they're not going to find it. But I've had such great success that, of course, I'm going to deploy them to make sure, but I'm going to use other techniques if I also don't find what I'm looking for.
So it sounds like, as a search manager, you know that you have resources, kind of the capabilities and limits of those resources, but also the overlap, and that you do have the ability to bring in all of these resources to increase the likelihood of finding human remains or whatever you need to find to build your case.
Yeah, exactly. Like I rely on all of my resources because like I said, I want to get it up to as close to 100%
Hmm.
um, probability of detection as I can. So if I can get it up to overlapping 3 or 4 different resources to get myself up to like maybe even like a 95, which is amazing, then that's so great. So there's so many techniques that you can use. It's just knowing which resources to deploy at what times, which resources are available, because I'm not going to send a ground search team out in the middle of the night because
You can't see
unless I'm
anything.
looking, yeah, exactly, because they're relying on their eyes, unless I'm looking for someone who is very high risk and they're in danger. That's kind of the only time I would ever deploy just a ground searcher out at night. So
We're not going to
yeah,
talk
you
about all
need
those CSI episodes that are filmed at night and they're searching at night.
exactly.
And I think, it sounds like that's the kicker. If there's a takeaway from, my experience and the stories I've heard and what you're telling me, it's really a matter of knowing that there are resources out there, they're available, and to use them.
Yes, exactly. So I think the most important thing is making those connections and knowing what is available to you, because and we use so many different techniques. So just it like I said, it really depends on what type of search you're doing. Like I using the if we think someone's maybe still alive or still showing off a little bit of heat, so maybe we believe they might still be alive, but they might be deceased, then sending the FLIR up from the helicopter is absolutely amazing, because you have that heat sensor camera that's going to show in the middle of the night, like when I won't necessarily deploy my dogs or my ground searchers, then I have the cameras from the helicopter that will sense any type of heat, especially in a non-traffic area. It's absolutely amazing. You can see animals walking. You can see if a body is lying down. You can see if they're being covered up by anything. As long as they're putting out a little bit of heat, then our helicopter is going to find them.
Very cool.
Yes, yeah. So it's just about knowing what resources you have and how to handle those resources and overlap them for your greatest chance of success.
So then let's talk about the stuff that Shari has been doing. And even though she's been working primarily with the canine units, in Ontario and in Alberta, because a cadaver dog cannot search for and be trained on pig bones, they have to be, trained in searching for human bones. We are using these studies to help train the dog handlers, rather than the dogs.
Yes.
And anybody else who wants to come along, like you.
Yep.
So what do you see coming out of that?
Oh, I mean, you know what? We've only done this study and I've only been working with Shari for a very short amount of time, and I've already changed how I've done my searches. So for example,
Really?
yeah, which is absolutely amazing. So on this last search I did within this last month here, I noticed that around all of the bones, there were a lot of feathers. So I didn't realize that birds played such a huge role in animal predation and
Big
carrying
time.
of the bones. Yeah. So I had to expand my search area a lot. And there was actually a couple pieces of small pieces of the body that I could not find. And I'm quite certain that those were taken away by birds. So it's been amazing so far just to listen to her lectures and implement some of the things that I've learned from her lectures into my searches, which I already have. So especially
Fabulous.
on, yeah, especially on like how fast a body will decompose, and what will first come, and like just seeing the different paths that the animals took and that kind of thing. I actually closed off one side of my search just because of her presentations and knowing, I guess, the behaviors of the animals. I closed off one side of my search and pretty much cut it in half because I knew that there was like a natural barrier that these animals wouldn't go through, and there was paths where the bones were leading. So I think just having all that knowledge and listening to her lectures has helped me so much already as a search manager and as a missing persons investigator.
Fabulous. So if you were able to cut that search pretty much in half, that's an amazing amount of resources, time, and money that you're saving.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. So do you have any, I don't know, bucket list or ideal items that you would love to learn about? I'm looking for study ideas. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I'd like to learn more about when a body goes into the water, and
Oh, the water stuff.
yeah,
Yeah.
so the water is so huge to us. So in the missing persons unit, we do see a lot of people, a lot of suicides. We see them jump off the bridges and then their bodies are never to be found again. Even though we know when they went in, we have searchers out right away. And some of them will appear within a day, some of them will appear within a week, 10 days, months, and then they'll appear, like some of them, a lot of them will come up within 200 meters, whereas others, it's like, 200 kilometers down the river. So that when a body goes into the river, there is a low probability of locating them. So that's where I would love to learn more about. And I guess my fascination with this kind of started when I was on a file up north in the RCMP. So every one of the communities is along the Mackenzie River, and there was a young girl that had gone into the river, and we brought up, actually, because there was no cadaver dogs trained up in the Northwest Territories, they ended up bringing up water cadaver dogs from the United States. And these water dogs, they sat on the boat and they were able to smell any human decomposition that was potentially in the river. And we had no idea. We knew where she had gone in the river, but it was days and days. And the dogs ended up actually hitting on the area where she was probably lodged for quite some time. So the water is a huge mystery to me. I guess I would love to learn more about it, just because so many of our files end up being in the river, and we're doing multiple river searches. We're trying to use sonar in the water, and like in that river, in the North Saskatchewan River, it's hard based on the depth, based on the speed. And we just never know where they're going to be, if they're going to pop up, that kind of thing.
Very interesting.
Yeah, for sure. So, and I've seen some where they've been in the river for quite some time, and there's severe decomposition on the top piece where the body would have been out of the water, but barely any decomposition from on the lower half, where there was no, where the body we knew probably was in the water the whole time. So it's very fascinating to me. And something I would like to learn more about, for sure. And if the body comes up and goes to the side, are animals coming and carrying it off? Because I had one of my files, missing person back in 2016, where the skull was found in a farmer's field. So did an animal take it there? Was there a flood that led it to go there? I don't know.
And skull is one of those lovely things from the human body that is just not a good indicator of where the person likely started off, because that skull
Yes.
can roll for miles.
Yes, exactly. So
You never know.
Yeah.
Very cool. So anything else that you would like to tell me or that you would like to say?
Oh, no, I'm really excited to be part of Shari's research and just to learn. Like, I'm just trying to take in as much as I can and learn as much as I can and apply that to my searches, because it is so beneficial to our service. And I'm so glad that we did end up connecting in with her and learning some of this stuff. And, I've been taking this and teaching it to as many people as I can, especially in the search manager world. And I'm just really excited to see what kind of comes out of these studies and just be able to apply it to real life searches.
Fabulous. Well, yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how these studies turn out. I mean, we're slowly seeing this year's in Alberta, the ones that we put out in August.
Yeah.
And we'll have to, it's baby steps. We're just in the pilot stages, and Shari's never worked in Alberta. So, slowly finding out that having grizzly bears tear up your pig is not the norm. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Please leave a rating or review and share this episode and podcast with your friends, family, and colleagues.